heroes alive. This is our principle. I think these words can be understood by all adequate people.
Months underground with her husband. She thinks he is still there.
It's very painful, for me especially. My husband is still there, and I know a lot of people who are still there. What they are...
Ukrainian soldiers yesterday said they had reached the Russian border. The process of liberating the towns and villages of Kharkiv is well underway. Stepanenko endured the invasion of Rusko-ukrainska. With the arrival of Ukrainian troops, he decided...
The cluster shelling. I don't care much, but I got my things together and left.
The battles for Mariupol and Kharkiv may be drawing to a close, but this war is far from over.
To unilaterally change the Northern Ireland Protocol, part of the Brexit deal signed by Boris Johnson. She insisted the UK's preference was for a negotiated agreement with the European Union. The protocol introduced checks on goods moving between Britain and Northern Ireland. The EU
and protect the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. That is why I am announcing our intention to introduce legislation in the coming weeks to make changes in the protocol.
And about what exactly is being put forward here?
Well, we don't know what exactly because it's still pretty vague, but I think in broad terms, Matthew, what the UK government wants in an ideal world is for the EU to make some compromises or more than it currently is, and it hopes that that will be enough to tempt the pro-union Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, back into power sharing in Northern Ireland. I mean, of course, the danger is, and I'll keep this as short as I can, is that the EU does...
Talking about continuing with negotiations, but they're negotiating now with a threat very clearly on the table.
Yeah, Matthew, the response from the European Commission here has, in a way, I think, mirrored the position that the UK...
Back to Rob there at Westminster. Boris Johnson said on the television yesterday, yes, I agreed it, the protocol. I hoped and believed our friends, the EU, would not necessarily want to apply it. So that was, of course, the history of why he came.
A fight, and of course there's bound to be vast amounts of criticism, there already is, of Boris Johnson. What happened to your oven-ready deal that now needs to be completely remade? So all sorts of criticism, but I go back to the likely dilemma that Mr. Johnson enough to get the DUP back into government, and Brexiteers, hardline Brexiteers in his own party are spoiling for a fight with the EU. What does he do then? What does he consider the least worst option?
Nick, a final thought. Do we know what the EU might consider this has been implemented or not?
No, it doesn't, and Brussels says, Matthew, that it's actually been quite flexible in the way it's been applying the Northern Ireland Protocol, and said the shame here is that they're actually making decent progress on other matters. And it's really Europe, millions of refugees heading to EU countries, soaring energy prices, lots of people struggling with the cost of living. This is not something they want to get into. They don't want to get in a war of words. They don't want to get into a trade war at all. Some talk of that. I don't think we're anywhere near that.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks a lot. Now, do stay with us because still to come on today's Global, a brutal heat wave hits parts of India and Pakistan, causing water shortages and misery for millions.
The actions of a few affect the lives of many. Join SHRM's global HR community to make monumental impact and cause the effect you wish to see in the workplace today.
Nature, all-powerful and uncompromising, a force.
Welcome back to Global here on BBC World News. Now, an intense heat wave is sweeping through northern India and Pakistan, setting new record high temperatures and impacting even worse, though, in parts of Pakistan, the mercury touching an astonishing 51 degrees. Well, this is the fifth heat wave in the region since March. Heat waves are common in northern India and Pakistan, especially in May and June. Thank you so much for being here with us. I mean, as I was alluding to there, heat waves are not new in the region around this time, but not usually this early.
so this is a vindication of the attribution of human activities to climate change. And these, if continues, then you have mentioned that huge impacts on human lives as well as the economies it implements. Economic dimensions, social dimensions, and environmental dimensions. In terms of water, you have mentioned that huge stress on water resources, on agriculture, for example, the serious impact on the on wheat production, where India and Pakistan are major producers of wheat. Then electricity, people are suffering from hours together out of power outages. And they are kind of jumping from frying pan into hot waters.
Yes.
Because water...
now, experts are warning that India will face more frequent, more intense heat waves, testing the limits of human survival. This is unlikely to be a one-off, isn't it?
Yes, sure. Is real. And it has come. There is no denying of the fact. IPCC reports have been giving us warning for the last few decades.
Yes, so exactly on that point, what aspect of life in terms of the death numbers, the number of labour hours being lost? I mean, I looked at the figure from India, 259 billion hours lost just in the last 12 months from heat-related issues.
In water sector, so the impact is extremely huge in all dimensions.
Well, it is quite a warning that you give. We will watch again in the coming months ahead to see what responses we might get. Is about to begin the most important part of its mission. After travelling 7 miles since it landed on the Red Planet over a year ago, the rover will start to collect rock samples which could answer the question, was there life on Mars? As our
onto the Martian surface. Over the last year, it's revealed the planet as never seen before, taking some selfies along the way. It's been busy trundling across the dusty terrain. And it's made history by flying a helicopter, the first powered flight on another planet. Now Perseverance is ready to begin the most important part of its mission, hunting for signs of life. And it's reached an area where it has the best chance of finding it.
I have been staring at this delta
to create a delta. The rover landed here in the floor of the crater. It's spent more than a year travelling the 7 miles, that's about 11 kilometres, to get to the base of the delta. Now it has a 40-metre climb to reach the top. Promising rocks. An onboard drill will collect samples so scientists can analyse what's inside.
What we're looking for are little bits of ancient microbial communities that might have fallen down to the bottom of the lake, that were living somewhere in the water column, and then
see what we see is going to rewrite history books regardless of the answer.
The mission is revealing the eerie beauty of Mars, even showing us a Martian solar eclipse and capturing sounds of the rover.
In Sri Lanka, only yesterday the new Prime Minister was talking about only having 1 day's fuel left in the country. As well as that, there are huge shortages of medicines. We'll have a special report from our correspondent.
More heavy rain is in the forecast here. We've also got extensive heavy rain working into southern and western areas of India, particularly Karnataka and Kerala, where we could be looking at around 100 to 200 millimetres of rain or so over the next 24 hours. Those largest in Sindh province. So dangerous heat really continuing to be a big problem across this part of the world, dangerous for health and could cause some problems with infrastructure as well. Now across the northeast of India, this is another area where we're going to see some torrential downpours.
Mustard specialist since 1933. Barso se sarso.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
The context.
News in depth
The Context with Christian Fraser on BBC World News.
This is a residential building. There's a real sense that the danger, the conflict is coming closer.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In-depth programming on BBC World News.
In our connected world, all news is international. So,
mass shooting. Joe Biden is expected to meet first responders and families. He's already condemned racist extremism and spoken about the hate that remains a stain on the soul of America. Also on today's programme, the crisis in Sri Lanka. We have a special report on the severe shortage of medicines and the disastrous effect that's having. And Pennsylvania picks its candidates for the crucial US midterm elections just months away. It's among is in Kyiv and has more on those developments.
The exact circumstances have been kept very much under wraps, we have to say. As with all of these negotiations, it's the United Nations and the Red Cross that have been at the heart of them, and they are viewed as villains. The Azov Battalion in particular are a bête noire of the Russians, and we are, even now, as these negotiations are starting, hearing members of the Duma debate exactly what should happen to them. Talks are currently ongoing in the Russian parliament, with some people saying they should pass legislation, they'll be released, or whether something else may happen. Well, that we're going to find out over the coming days and weeks.
Joe Inwood in Kyiv. With me is our World Affairs editor, John Simpson. And John, let's start with those events in Mariupol in the last 24 hours, because after so...
They've fought and fought and fought themselves to a standstill. So it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians. They wanted badly to have Mariupol fall by the 9th of May. Victory.
President Zelensky's advisor was saying only in the last couple of hours that he thought they had changed the course of this war because it has given Ukrainian forces time to get themselves better prepared for that push in the east. What we don't know is what indeed has been negotiated, where these people go, what will be done with them. I mean, the suggestion does appear to be that they might be involved in some sort of prisoner exchange.
It does look like it. There's a little bit of history there.
Away from those events in Mariupol, what did you make of these reports that we've heard that Vladimir Putin is now in almost day-to-day charge of all of the military decisions?
Well, of course, this General Ismay, who was his main go-between, military go-between, was often in despair at what Churchill did, and clearly Putin simply cannot keep his hands off the detail, the fine detail, capture that place.
On Russian state television with a retired military colonel talking openly about how this war wasn't going well, and some of the detail of that was absolutely fascinating.
And I may say horrifying years that Putin's clamped down on these things. So it's not like the old days when, you know, he'd have been dragged off and disappeared. Even the woman that appeared on the set of the news with the holding up the banner, she served a little bit. You know, he's a military bloke and he just tells you what's really happening.
He also pays tribute to just the morale of those Ukrainian forces as well. So it is absolutely fascinating looking at that debate. John, thanks once again for...
Analysts have speculated that Mr. Musk may be looking for ways to renegotiate the price of the deal or walk away. Well, let's get more on this and find out what might be going on. From New York, we're joined by Dan Ives, Managing Director and Senior Equity Analyst at Wedbush Securities.
Well, I think it's really turned into a circus show. I think fundamentally Musk really got cold feet in the deal, looking for an excuse to ultimately either get out of the deal or talk down the price. You look at the bot and the fake account.
And what will happen if it does?
Look, I think right now about a 65% chance that Musk probably walks, you know, from the deal. $1 billion breakup fee is pretty small. I do think he still wants the deal, but again, it's a changing market, three upon fake bot account issue.
Yeah, and if they do renegotiate, how much is that going to involve looking at the share price now, which has been impacted by every tweet we get from Elon Musk?
Look, I mean, there's a better chance of me playing the Premier League than this. I think we're going to see more renegotiations behind the scenes.
What's the legal obligations? You mentioned that Musk is going to have to pay $1 billion if he walks away, but can Twitter take him to court and fight over this?
Oh, definitely. I mean, they could fight him in court because of some of the due diligence issue really started to be, we'll call it, exposed. Then fundamentally, the story of Twitter changes. And that's why this has really all been a soap opera, but I believe some more twists and turns likely ahead.
OK, Dan, great to get your thoughts. Thank you. Our Europe correspondent Jessica Parker reports from Lombardy.
Steel runs through the veins of this community, but it's an industry under strain. With the war in Ukraine and COVID,
they're under. We're in the red, but with the hope of trying to break even eventually.
During your 40 years in the industry, is this the worst you've known it?
This is the worst moment I have seen, because no one can predict what will happen.
but it's doubled, even though we are never at home, because we leave in the morning at 7 and we arrive home at 5 in the evening.
We are tightening our belts a little more. Instead of saving a lot, you'll save less.
Sometimes we have to shut down in some hours because it's too expensive. We have tried to adapt to this situation. Of course, the main consequence is that our price of the finished product has risen a lot.
The world. Workers here, like many, can only keep an anxious eye on shocks they may feel but can't control. Jessica Parker, BBC News, in Brescia, Northern Italy.
Well, that's it from me for now, Matthew.
Almond butter.
As we face the world's greatest environmental challenges, what we need most is solutions. Our new website, Future Planet, brings you...
Take this stage by stage. Here's the BBC Stephen McDonald in Beijing. The West has stepped up sanctions against Russia. Let's look at some of the international reaction. Tell us what you've been hearing. In practical terms, what does that mean? Next, we have to step back and let's just remind ourselves this is all part of the same story.
Welcome back to Global here on BBC World News, and let's go back to Sri Lanka.
Fuel supply can be shut anytime while power cuts multiply. But how does one survive without life-saving drugs? Frantic social media appeals for help to fight an ailment. Even government doctors recently came out to protest against the shortage.
Government has searched various other means to alleviate this crisis, but if you don't alleviate the medicinal shortage in prompt manner,
are returning home without being checked by a doctor, without getting a medicine, or without getting proper treatment. Sri Lanka is in the middle of its worst economic crisis ever. The country imports
and confined only to emergencies so that they can save surgical items necessary for surgeries. We know we are going to have huge problem within next couple of weeks.
For now, Sri Lanka is praying just to get hold of all.
Because it's just 6 months till the key midterm elections, which could see President Biden's Democratic Party lose control of Congress to the Republicans. Right now, voters in 5 states, including Kentucky, North Carolina and Pennsylvania, are choosing who. Philadelphia. He's a professor in political science at the University of Pennsylvania. Mark, welcome here to the programme. These primaries are fascinating, especially to see Donald Trump's ability to shape the next generation of Republicans. Remind me of that.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking that Trump would be making endorsements based solely on policies that different people are putting forward, Oz would probably not be the first person you would think Trump would be endorsing. A centerpiece of his campaign. On January 6th, he was in Washington marching and protesting the certification of the Electoral College. And he recently picked up the Trump endorsement, and that seems more for the Democrats and the Republicans statewide. And so I do think that it'll be interesting to see how these Trump endorsements play out once we're not just having people facing Republican primary voters, but the more general election electorate in which not everyone especially among Democratic primary voters. A number of them cast mail ballots, and so they've already voted. And it's not. It seems as if, from the reporting, that he's going to have a recovery and will be fine to be the candidate in the fall.
A final quick thought. I mean, these Pennsylvania results.
Democratic versus Republican primary elections. Back in 2018, the midterm during Donald Trump's presidency, there were clear patterns when you looked over all the states that Democrats were really engaged relative to the past. And at least the early primaries to date in the United States.
He's been in Chernihiv, north of the capital, Kyiv. That is coming up in our next edition of Global. Don't go away.
Push your head, yeah. Asaman's and
Nature, all-powerful and uncompromising, a force over which mankind has no control. But when one aligns with nature, she is warm, nurturing and loving. P-Mark mustard oil has always followed in because when we live in harmony with nature, life can be great.
The mustard specialist since 1933. Barso se sarso.
Hello there. On Tuesday, we had a risk of a few severe thunderstorms across Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas. Head into Wednesday, heavy showers and thunderstorms will be working into the Ohio Valley, around the Great Lakes, into parts of Ontario and Manitoba as well. The heavy rain that we've seen in Quebec, though, should tend to ease away, but it'll still be quite chilly for some here. We've had still a risk of a little bit of light rain in places, though. In Europe, some heavy thundery showers will start to develop across parts of France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, maybe into Denmark too for Thursday, but otherwise hot and sunny weather conditions for the time of year, with temperatures well above average for a couple of days. And it will take a time for the sand to come out of the atmosphere, so we'll probably still have rather hazy skies around to end the week. Heavy rains across parts of Kerala and Karnataka could bring some localised flooding, 100 to 200 millimetres of rain. It's going to very much feel like the monsoon.
Winter Olympics,
now to cricket,
the Tour de France,
the Africa Cup of Nations.
The debate keeps raging.
They're still the team to beat. England's batting is weak. It's going quite well.
Definitely a lot of disappointment.
The results keep coming.
So what was going through your mind?
It was absolutely amazing.
My heart rate was up. It's part.
This is BBC. Also on today's programme, the US President and First Lady are in Buffalo to pay their respects to those affected by Saturday's mass shooting. Joe Biden is expected to meet first responders and families. He's already condemned racist extremism. Hello and welcome to BBC News. In the past hour or so, the Reuters news agency has reported at least 7 buses have carried surrendered Ukrainian fighters out of the Azovstal steelworks, escorted by pro-Russian armed forces. The reports from Mariupol suggest last night, of course, more than 260 soldiers left after a negotiated surrender. They've been taken to areas held by Russian-backed rebels. Meanwhile, Western military sources say Vladimir Putin is now directly involved in the day-to-day running of the war, taking to...
If this is the end of the battle for Mariupol, it's not how many would have envisaged it. Ukrainian fighters being frisked by the Russian soldiers they had been in a bloody battle with for more than 80 days. Some of these men are seriously wounded. Seriously injured were driven to hospital. More than 200 more were taken to another facility inside Russian-controlled territory. It is believed the soldiers will be exchanged in a prisoner swap. But it seems some fighters have stayed behind.
Under there, under bombardment, not being let out, it's terrible. I feel helpless. I really want to help them. I just don't know how. I feel really powerless.
While Moscow can finally
from my house. After that, I was under cluster shelling. I don't care much, but I got my things together and left.
The battles for Mariupol and Kharkiv may be drawing to a close, but this war is far from over. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Lviv.
Well, worth just returning to those developing reports from the Reuters news agency saying that those buses have left the steelworks in Mariupol with the International Red Cross and others and the UN clearly happening. We are expecting to get the first pictures of that here in the next few minutes, so do stay with us on the programme for that. We'll also be live with Lise Doucette there in Kyiv programme in the next moment or two. So plenty more on that, our main story, Ukraine. Well, before that, let's turn to the United States because the President and the First Lady are in Buffalo today to pay their respects to the role of America. Well, Neda Tawfik has more on the President's visit.
President Biden said that he was motivated to run for office by seeing the rise of right-wing extremism. So this is a president that is racist hate online, how that is creating extremism in the United States for the younger generations. Remember, the shooter was 18 years old, was evaluated in high school for making threatening comments. So President community is, while they appreciate the condolences, the sympathy from society, that they want to see real action to make sure that Buffalo is the last city that has to deal with this. Something we've heard from others.
Details discovered since Saturday are genuinely shocking and horrifying, aren't they, in terms of the level of planning, the level of hate and potentially, I suppose, the missed opportunities that the authorities over those months.
Store several times on reconnaissance visits before the shooting. In fact, he came in contact with a security guard who thought he was suspicious. They're also looking at the fact that back when he was in high school, he went through a mental to purchase a military-grade weapon, an assault rifle. So many people are bringing up the fact that in New York there are things that exist called a red flag law that is supposed to be able to flag up when people like the shooter. It's online companies, legislatures to finally pass common sense legislation.
Well, that was Neda Tawfik. Let me just show you the live pictures from Buffalo because we anticipate that we're going to hear from the President in the next little while, we're told by our Washington. Also to come on today's Global, the Perseverance rover reaches a critical point in its mission, trying to establish any signs of life on Mars. Welcome back to today's Global on BBC World News. Our main stories here. Joe Biden is expected to meet first responders live back to Kyiv and live to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's there for us. Lise, over to you.
Yes, day 83 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And while Ukraine continues to insist this is a war, in terms of the services that have been disrupted and in some places completely cut off. One of them, of course, is health. And with us here is the director for the World Health Organization for Europe, Dr. Hans Kluge, who's been making a visit here.
Of the people, the Ukrainian people, the healthcare workers, they know that the war is not finished, but at the same time to think, how do we build a healthier and better future for the people?
So they're already talking about reconstruction, even as this war.
At the same time, I was heartbroken if I heard the stories of the doctors, nurses. I mean, and I saw facility after facility being destroyed, the mental health facility, the tuberculosis clinic, the primary healthcare facility, at the same time, in not one window which was not broken.
So in the places that you visited, you saw that there are enough Ukrainian doctors, other medical staff still staying in place to provide the kind of, it must be enormous demands on the health service.
Absolutely.
They ask you for assistance. Is the WHO in a position to provide it?
Absolutely, from day one. But of course, we also face challenges. I mean, we have been very, very responsive. And I must say, it is in partnership. We have about 100 civil society organizations as well, because water supply, safe drinking water, power supply, our basic issues, and without that we cannot provide healthcare. So we have to look at partnership.
Where's the pre-positioning? Because if you can't get to Mariupol, you probably cannot get
to the Russian authorities that we can leave no one behind.
Do they listen when you make that call?
Well, at different levels we have discussions with all parties to really call that attacks to healthcare facilities is really a...
Many of our viewers will know, watching the scenes every day coming from different parts of Ukraine, the reconstruction needs are enormous. That's all from us for now.
Lise, thanks very much. Well, let's continue to assess the situation in Ukraine.
They did absolutely unbelievable, and they were taking the siege for holding the ground for more than 10 weeks in awful situation. So it was, we were sure, and it is impossible to hold it.
Escorted out, and as witnesses have been reporting that many of those on board appear not to be wounded, unlike last night, of course. So many of the people who got out last night were wounded. Where they're going, though, is unclear. How much do you worry about
their own soldiers? They don't even take bodies of their soldiers and officers from the field. So but I don't want to say anything more because it's so touching. So I hope we will have exchange, and I hope to see our heroes with whom I am in messages. First of all, Ukraine needs to win. For this we need weapons, and once more time weapons, especially air defense, aircrafts, long-range artillery. The second message is clear. After the victory, we need to
Parliament, the UK Parliament, Canadian Parliament, all looking at that area of using frozen assets for any sort of rebuilding of Ukraine in the future. Now, you are an MP for the Odessa region, as I said there in the introduction. Are you fearful?
Missile cruise in Moskva, which is now submarine. So I am sure that we can defend Odessa. But yes, there is risk, and that is which will have consequences for the whole world, because Russia is blocking the Black Sea, which is
yesterday from the governor of the Bank of England and plenty of others about just the crisis that we could be seeing the early stages of. Now, I know that you want some sort of corridor for the UN to try and open up the Black Sea. Just explain it.
For ships coming from Odessa to through Bosphorus to countries which need it, and that is one of the possible decisions to save millions of people, because according to estimations of the United Nations,
I think you can do that through the United Nations even with Russia's veto.
I think that it's something where the whole world should influence Russia, and to say your aggressive politics, your violation of international law, everything is clear. But
then with the First Lady, they there to see for themselves, offer support for the families. Let's put the microphones up.
I just wanted to say thank you to the families for opening up your hearts to us.
Schumer and Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Higgins. And Gov, thank you for taking my call when I called. And I'll never forget what she said. I said, I'd like to maybe come up if it's okay. She said, this is officers, first responders, and faith leaders that are here today. Jill and I have come to stand with you. And to the families, we've come to grieve with you. It's not the same, but we know a little bit what it's like here. The pain, the depth of a loss that's so profound. You know, we know it's hard to believe, and you're probably not going to believe it, but I can tell you now, from our personal experience and many others who we've met, the day's going to come. We've been reading about them. We visited the memorial where they show the love for them, and you've all shown by the supermarket. And Celestine Cheney, 65 years old, brain cancer survivor, home to help take care of her brother after his bone marrow transplant. She went to buy groceries for dinner. The center of attention, who made everyone in the room laugh and smile when she walked in. Andre Mack of their world. Hayward Patterson, 67, father, church deacon, fed the homeless at the soup kitchen, gave rides at the grocery store to neighbors who needed help. 3 decades. Loved electric cars. Hero who gave his life to save others on a Saturday afternoon. And had that man not been wearing that vest that he purchased, bulletproof vest, mother and grandmother. Ruth Whitfield, 88. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, sang in the church choir, a caretaker of her husband, bringing him clean clothes. And all 3 are injured. Zaire Goodman, 20, shot in the neck, but fighting through it. Jennifer Warrington, 50, Christopher Braden, 55, both treated with injuries on a long road to Americans. A great nation, because we're good people. Jill and I bring you this message from deep in our nation's soul. In America, evil manifest in gunmen who massacred innocent people in the name of hateful and perverse ideology, rooted in fear and racism. It's taken so much. What happened here is simple and straightforward. Terrorism. Terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Violence inflicted in the service of hate and the vicious thirst for power has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced, that's the word, replaced, by the other, by people who don't look like them. Those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and for profit. That's what it is. That's when I said no, no. And I, honest to God, those who know me, Chuck, you know, I wasn't going to run for certain. But I was going to be darned if I was going to let anyway. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America. None. His strength has always come from the idea. It's going to sound corny, but think about it. What's the idea of our nation? That we're all children of God. All life, liberty, our universal goods, gifts of God, words and deeds that stalk our streets, our stores, our schools. This venom, this violence cannot be the story of our time. We cannot allow that to happen. Look, I'm not naive. Mobilize terrorism. We just need to have the courage to do that, to stand up. Look, the American experiment in democracy is in a danger like it hasn't been in my life, not making distinctions. Reverend, the scripture is seeing that we're all part of the divine. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the America I know, that Jill knows. Represent the views of a hate-filled minority. We can't allow them to distort America, the real America. We can't allow them to destroy the soul of the nation. As President of the United States, I travel the world, run down by weapons of war, deployed in a racist cause. We have to refuse to live in a country where fear and lies are packaged for power and for profit. In the sidelines. We have to resolve that here in Buffalo, that from the tragedy, this tragedy will come hope and light and life. It has to. And that on our watch, the sake of the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun and hold you in the palm of his hand. That's my wish for us. We can do this if we resolve to do it. And may God guide the United States of America, now and always. To the families, as my grandpop used to say when I walked out of his home in Scranton, he'd say, Joey, spread the faith. And my grandma would yell, no.
To grieve with you. He then talked about the loss that pierces your soul, losing a loved one. The anger, the pain, the depth of the loss, he said, was so profound. And he said, through personal experience, he talked about them and paid his tribute to them. He then spoke of wider America. He said, evil will not win. He said, hate will not prevail. White supremacy will not have the final. Remain silent. That would be complicit. And then, in a brief section about the way forward, he said, we can keep assault rifles off our streets. In terms of the terrorism, the ideology of hate on the internet, he said, today's attack, and you saw the pictures there from a little earlier at the start of the visit, paying tribute and laying flowers together with the First Lady. So those are the comments there from Joe Biden there in Buffalo, and he can more from Ukraine because we've had the first pictures of at least 7 more buses carrying surrendered Ukrainian fighters leaving the Azovstal steelworks, escorted by pro-Russian armed forces. These the pictures, of course, so many people getting out have emerged. The question has been where they are being taken to. We knew they were being taken to Russian rebel-held territory, but just in the last few moments whilst we were watching Joe Biden, the Reuters news agency saying that those people have been in Mariupol.
But you also have to say it's been a Russian success eventually to have really pacified Mariupol entirely. Those guys have stayed in there for 82 out of the 84 days. To have a parade through Mariupol, it just became impossible because of these soldiers, holed up there.
And they thwarted all of those plans. Interesting that President Zelensky's advisor was saying only in the last couple of hours that he thought
than it did because of the defenders of Mariupol. So they didn't win in the end, but they were never going to win. But it was by holding up the Russians, they've held up the entire war.
What indeed has been negotiated, where these people go, what will be done with them. I mean, the suggestion does appear to be that they might be involved in some sort of prisoner exchange.
It does look like it, doesn't it, in somewhere in the Ukrainian army. So there's a little bit of history there.
Away from those events in Mariupol, what did you make of these reports that we've heard that Vladimir Putin is now in almost day-to-day charge of all of
the main military go-between was often in despair at what Churchill did, and clearly Putin simply cannot keep his hands off the detail, the fine detail, capture that place, go there, withdraw.
To resist. A final thought, because you have seen footage of a fascinating debate on Russian state television with a retired military colonel talking openly about how this war wasn't going well, and some of the detail of that was absolutely fascinating.
And I may say horrifying. The woman who was interviewing him, she clearly wasn't expecting this. You have to served a little bit of time in jail, but it wasn't like the old days. But he said the whole world is against us, even if we don't want to admit it. Our biggest problem is that we're in total geopolitical isolation. That absolutely
arrived at a former penal colony in Russian-controlled Olenovika, and that is an area just south of Donetsk. So we knew they were being taken to Russian-controlled territory, but the latest reports of where they have gone on Colombo.
One by one, essential commodities in Sri Lanka are drying up. Fuel supply can be shut anytime while power cuts multiply. But how does one survive without life-saving drugs? His organs.
Now the problem is, if you have money.
Now the problem is, even if you have money, no drugs. So if I don't get these 2 medicines, I can survive only for 3 months, maximum 3 months. That's a
because of lack of medicines. those who are managing their way out here from distant places because there's a crisis in public transport because of fuel problem, most of them are returning home without being checked by a doctor, without getting a medicine, or without getting... The country imports around 85% of its medical supplies. But with foreign currency reserves running low, essential drugs are now difficult to obtain. Cancer and other life-saving drug stocks are fast running. For now, Sri Lanka is praying just to get hold of all the medicines at all. Nitin Shrivastava, BBC News, Colombo.
Now, NASA's Perseverance Mars rover is about...
A mission that began with a jaw-dropping descent, beaming back real footage of a Mars landing, as NASA's Perseverance rover was lowered onto the Martian surface. Over the last year, it's revealed the planet as never seen before, taking Now Perseverance is ready to begin the most important part of its mission, hunting for signs of life. And it's reached an area where it has the best chance of finding it.
I have been staring at this delta for years now, mostly in orbit. Rover. We know there was once liquid water on the surface of Mars. We know there are organics on the surface of Mars. And so all signs point to the surface of Mars 3.5 to 4 billion years ago being a habitable planet.
And this gives you an idea of what it once would have looked like. If we zoom in, this coloured area shows where the river met the lake, depositing sediment to create a delta. The rover landed here in the floor of the crater. It's spent more than into the most promising rocks. The hope is they'll contain signs of microbes that once lived there. But the best samples will be left on the Martian surface and collected by a future mission that will bring the rocks back to Earth.
Imagine if we found evidence that there was history books regardless of the answer.
The mission is revealing the eerie beauty of Mars, even showing us a Martian solar eclipse and capturing sounds of the rover hard at work. The red planet
after Saturday's mass shooting. These were the pictures from right at the start of that visit with the President and the First Lady laying flowers, but in the last little while a powerful speech from Joe Biden, and then going on to say in America evil will not win, hate will not prevail. And then in a long section on white supremacy he said it will not have the final word. He described it as a poison for global. Don't go away, we're back in a moment or two.
Indulge in the luxurious, the most spacious, and supremely comfortable BMW 3 Series Grand Limousine.
Forecast as we head into Wednesday, heavy showers and thunderstorms will be working into the Ohio Valley around the Great Lakes, into parts of Ontario and Manitoba as well. The heavy rain that we've seen in Quebec, though, should tend to ease away, but it'll still be quite chilly for some here. Hot and sunny weather conditions for the time of year, with temperatures well above average. It's also hotter than normal for northern parts of Morocco and northern Algeria, thanks to a ridge of high pressure causing lighter winds. We've got some rain and some fairly brisk winds for Cape Town, much cooler weather conditions.